Good morning, everyone. My goodness, we got 6 hours before that. Good evening, everyone. It appears that we're waiting for at least one more to make quorum. So we'll.
That is correct, Mark.
Okay, so we'll wait several minutes before we get started. Happy New Year.
Good evening. If it helps anything, I'm not sure if I identified myself, but this is Andy. Of course, I'm calling in this time instead of on the computer. If you're waiting for someone else.
Thank you, Andy. I do see a phone number on the line, 915-246-6897.
This is Rosa Estrada.
Perfect. Thank you, Rosa.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, with Rosa, we reached quorum.
Okay. Is there were there any members that indicated they would not be here today?
Those with prior notification were Mr. Miguel Hernandez, no others. Our chair is not on the line, I believe, but we do have our vice chair.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll put that to the vice chair. Mr. Schlesinger, would you like to get started, or do you want to give Kimberly a few minutes to see if she comes on? I think you're on mute. You're on mute, Bill. We didn't hear you.
Story of my life. It's about 3 after. Let's give her till 5 after.
Sounds good.
Okay.
So it's 5 after. Let's come to order. And do you do roll call first? It's not on the agenda.
Let me go ahead and bring the agenda up. 1 second. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I will go ahead and begin roll calling. Mauricio Felix. Jonathan Macias. Miguel Hernandez. Rosa Estrada.
Here.
Kimberly Cook McDaniel, Bill Schlesinger,
Here.
Marcela Carrillo,
Here.
and Arias.
Present.
So on item number 2, unless there's objection, we'll move that after public comment and the last action prior to adjournment. Is there objection? If not, then we'll move it. Mark, you've got your hand up.
I have a comment, if I may. Clarissa, I only heard 4 presents. Is quorum 4 or 5 for this task force?
It is now 4 because
Okay.
we had an individual to resign, yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Just wanted to check on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
The minutes from December 8th are before you. Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, we'll approve them by common consent. Omar, are you ready to present?
Hello, Mr. Schlesinger. Yes, I don't know if Clarissa, do you want me to share the presentation? Do you have it?
Yes, I do have it, and I could share it if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Okay, give me just 1 second to pull it up.
And while Clarissa pulls that up, I don't know if all of you have met Omar De La Rosa. He is the attorney assigned to Community and Human Development, among other departments. And if I may be so bold as to say, he is a rock star. And so we're really looking forward to his presentation. Thanks for being with us, Omar.
No problem. That was very kind of you, Mark. I don't know, probably the opposite of a rock star, but anyway. Okay, so I was asked to come and talk to you a little bit about the Texas Eviction Diversion Program. By any means, I'm not an expert. I know a little bit about it, and what I know, that's what I'm going to share with you all. So if we can go to the first slide, please. So this is an overview of the presentation. I'm going to provide you a timeline of the program, of what it is, how does it work, an example, and then I'll provide a few resources at the end. It'll be very quick and to the point. You can go to the next one. Thank you. So the timeline. So the Texas Eviction Diversion Program is set under the Texas Supreme Court emergency order regarding COVID-19 state of disaster. So the first order for the program was issued September 25th, 2020, and that's the 27th order. That's the one that actually established the program. The order was then renewed on November 9th, 2020, under the 28th emergency order, and on December 22nd, 2020, the court again renewed the order. So now the program is still active until March 15, 2021. Go to the next one. So what is the Texas Eviction Diversion? Oh, that one. So what is the Texas Eviction Diversion Program? So this program is brokered by the courts, and that term brokered is my term. That's the way I see it. So it's a program that is brokered by the courts. This program allows landlords to receive payments for past due rent in exchange for a dismissal of an eviction action. And we'll go over how it works a little bit more right now. This program only applies to evictions under Chapter 24 of the Texas Property Code. And if anybody looks up the property code, you'll find it. It's called forcible entry and detainer actions. Can we go to the next slide, please? So how does the program work? And Clarissa has this presentation if anybody wants it. But the way the program works is that this program requires landlords to plead in the original petition that the landlord has reviewed the Texas Diversion Program. So that's the first thing that this program does, right? So the petition is actually the document that gets filed in the court to start the lawsuit. So here's where the landlord is telling the court, hey, I didn't receive my rent. I want to evict this person. Well, the court is saying by rule of the Supreme Court, in that document, they have to tell the court, hey, I'm aware of the Texas Eviction Diversion Program. So that's the first part of the program. Second bullet point there says that the program requires the citation to provide notice to the tenant informing the tenant of the Texas Eviction Diversion Program. So the citation is the document that gets provided to the tenant, informing the tenant of the eviction lawsuit and of the date that the tenant must show up to court. So what the program now does is, remember, one, it forces the landlord to put in the documents to the court that he knows about the program. The second thing is that it forces the landlord to tell the tenant in the citation about the program as well. So that's the second big thing about the program. The third bullet point is at trial. So once the hearing is set, the parties will show up to the hearing. Under the program, the judge must discuss the program again with both parties present. And what the judge is required to do there is, after he explains the program to the parties, then he's required to ask the parties if they want to participate. And the very important thing is that both parties have to agree to participate, so it's voluntary. So either the landlord or the tenant may refuse to participate. Now, the next bullet point says, if the parties agree to participate, the proceedings are abated for 60 days. So the court puts the proceedings on hold for 60 days. Nothing happens for 60 days. What those 60 days do is it allows the tenant to apply for financial assistance from TDHCA or for any other rental assistance programs that they may find. Now, during those 60 days, the landlord may reconsider the participation in the program. So what the landlord may do during the 60 days is the landlord may say, you know what, I don't want to participate anymore. And what the landlord would do there is they would reinstate a motion. They would file a motion to reinstate the proceedings, meaning they would let the court know that they want to go through with the eviction. Now, what's the reason the landlord might do that, right? Well, there's a couple of reasons, and these are all just me trying to figure out why would a landlord file a motion to reinstate the proceedings. Well, the first one is maybe the tenant didn't qualify for any rental assistance program, right? So if the tenant did not qualify for a rental assistance program and the landlord still wants to get paid, he may file a motion to put the proceedings back to evict the tenant. The second reason is if maybe the landlord's not happy with the amount of rent that he was able to recover. So in that instance, the landlord may want to continue with the eviction proceedings as well. Now, let's say that the landlord or the tenant do not agree to participate in the programs. What happens there is that the evictions proceedings continue. Now, why wouldn't the parties agree? I think from my perspective, I think that the landlord is the one that's more likely not to want to participate, right? And maybe the reason is that maybe the amount of rent is too much, much more than what the tenant will qualify under some rental assistance programs. Maybe the landlord has other claims that have nothing to do with rent, right? So he may want to still proceed with the eviction procedures. So remember that this program is voluntary, so there may be reasons why the parties do not want to participate. Now, what happens if the landlord doesn't file a motion to reinstate? So remember that the program, once the parties agree to participate in the program, the court is going to put all the proceedings on hold for 60 days. So in those 60 days, if the court doesn't hear back from the landlord saying that they want to reinstate the proceedings, what the court is going to do is they're going to automatically dismiss the case with prejudice. That means that the landlord will not be able to bring back this action for that particular rent. So if we think about it, why wouldn't the landlord file a motion to reconsider, right? Why would the landlord let the 60 days expire and not come back to the court and allow the case to be dismissed? Well, one is if in those 60 days the tenant applied for rental assistance and the landlord got paid, if the landlord's happy, he doesn't have to do anything else. The case gets dismissed automatically. The other thing is maybe the landlord forgets. Now, if the landlord were to forget to file anything during those 60 days, the case is going to get dismissed, and it will be with prejudice, meaning the landlord wouldn't be able to bring back that same case again to the court. Now, remember that this dismissal, though, is only for that particular rent, right? If the landlord has any other claims that have nothing to do with the rent, or if the landlord's claims are something that happened after this case, they can bring it back to the court. But as far as bringing it back for the same amount of rent that got dismissed, that's not going to be doable. So if you have to ask me, what's the value of this program overall? I think the value of the program is that the program forces the landlord and the tenant to become aware of the fact that there's rental assistance programs out there. That's really the value of this program, right? By requiring the parties to plead in their pleadings the fact that they know about the program in the citation, by requiring the judge to talk about the program during the hearing, it forces the parties to know that there's help out there and that they may qualify for that help. So I think that's the real value of this program. Can we go to the next slide, please, Clarissa? Next slide. Okay, so here's an example, right? So I know there was a lot of information on the previous slide, so just a really, really simple example. So person A is the landlord and person B is the tenant. So let's say that person B owes 3 months of rent in the amount of $2,400 for the 3 months to person A. Person A would file a lawsuit to evict person B. Now, in the lawsuit, in the petition, person A is required to tell the court that person A, the landlord, has reviewed the Texas Eviction Diversion Program. Now, when person A is going to serve person B with the lawsuit, person A is required to include in the citation information telling the tenant of the existence of the Texas Eviction Diversion Program. Now, once person A and person B get to the court hearing, the judge is going to ask both parties, do you know about the Texas Eviction Diversion Program? He's going to explain to them what it is, and then he's required to ask them, person A, person B, do you all want to participate in the program? If person A and person B want to participate in the program, the judge is going to tell them, we're going to abate the proceeding for 60 days. We're not going to do anything. In those 60 days, person B can go and apply for rental assistance, and that way the landlord can get paid. If after the 60 days, the landlord doesn't come back with any complaints, the judge is going to dismiss the action with prejudice. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, right here, you'll see the links to the resources. The first one is the link to the Texas Supreme Court website that talks about the program. And then the second is the TDHCA website that talks about the programs. Other than that, that's all I have for this particular item. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer. And if not, thank you for your time.
Are there any questions? So, Omar,
it looks like Rosa Estrada may have her hand up.
Yes, Rosa.
Oh, I think I pressed it by accident. Sorry, guys.
Okay. So I've got a couple questions. So there's a 30-day notice required anyway in the system. Does that clock start where it stopped, or does it start again? You're muted.
Sorry about that. Are we referring to the 60 days or which 30 days?
When you take somebody to justice of the peace, there's a 30-day period that they have to cure.
Right. So what this does is it stops the whole thing, right, for 60
Right.
days. So it's going to
But if it starts again, does it go back to the original 30-day notice, or does it pick up after the 30-day notice?
I would say the program doesn't specify. That's a very good question, Mr. Schlesinger. It doesn't specify, but it says that it resumes the proceedings, right? So I think it brings it back to where they left off.
Okay. And then is there any requirement or encouragement for the tenant to maintain contact with the landlord during the 60 days to update the landlord as to its progress on getting funds.
I don't know. So the program doesn't talk about that, right? But I don't know if there's some courts that maybe require some sort of status or follow-up to make sure that something is being done in those 60 days. But the way the program is structured, I think it does put it on the tenant, right? Because what it is it says, look, the landlord at any time during those 60 days that we're pausing the period, the landlord can decide to reinstate the proceedings, right? So if the tenant is not keeping the landlord informed, the tenant might get a little bit, the landlord might get a little bit desperate, and they may say, you know what, I haven't heard from this tenant in a while. It's been 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I'm just going to reinstate the evictions, right? So the incentive is on the tenant to make sure that he's keeping the landlord informed and to make sure that, the landlord is informed throughout the process. Now, some rental assistance programs actually require the landlord to sign on the program itself, right? I know there's some that the city's funding that the payment actually the landlord has to apply. So some of these programs will actually require the landlord to be very involved. So they'll be there. But I think that's a very good question, sir. I don't think it's a mandatory requirement to keep them, but I think it's built for in a way that it's in everybody's business to keep each other informed.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions or comments? It does seem that this is a step beyond previous restraints on the justices, where they really had a hard time doing anything on their own. This puts the justice of the peace in a more proactive position.
Absolutely, it does. The eviction thing. I think the pandemic. It surprised everybody, right? I guess maybe some people weren't surprised, but there's a lot of parties that go involved in the whole eviction thing, right? And right here, we're not even considering the lenders. We're not considering the federal government if they finance part of the stuff, right? This is just a strict transaction, assuming that there's no other interests involved. And everybody was trying to figure out what it is, what to do with this. Nobody wanted to get evicted. I think, like I said, the value of the program is that it forces people to be informed about the help that's out there. A lot of people don't know that there's assistance even to pay back rent, right? So this actually forces them to do that, and there's a lot of funds out there, and so I think that's the great value of it, that it forces people to become aware of the programs that are out there. It doesn't stop the eviction proceedings, okay? A lot of people might think that this is going to stop them from getting evicted. It's not even going to stop it for 60 days. It puts it on hold for 60 days, but the landlord can resume it at any time. So it's not like I'm buying myself 60 days. It's the real value is forcing everybody to find out about the programs, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Then,
and Mr. De La Rosa,
yes.
And I was going to ask, in addition to TDHCA, what other rental assistance programs do they get to, explore? Is it on them to, for them to, identify rental assistance programs at that point?
So, and I think Nicole or Mark, you all can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think TDHCA itself has a program, but then I don't know if they also have the ability of putting people in contact with all the other programs that are out there. I see Mark turned on his camera.
Right. What I can tell you is this is not, that I read this somewhere or anything. This is what makes sense to me and is logical. Is that, again, the 60 days is opened up just as an opportunity for the tenant, hopefully to work with the landlord to identify any means for that tenant to catch up on rent and, hopefully assure that future rent will be met. And so, to directly answer your question, well, actually, to indirectly answer your question, because like I say, I'm not 100% sure, but I've not read anything about this program that restricts it to any one source of rental assistance. And so from that, I would wager that it's open to any means of rental assistance that the tenant can find or that the landlord can find.
And so at that point, do the landlords receive some sort of a guidance to then refer the tenant to, different means of rental assistance?
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
So the program requires, again, there's several stages, right? If I'm the landlord and I filed the petition to get somebody evicted, if I didn't include there that I knew about the program, they're going to make me fix my petition, right? So I'm going to have to find out, as the landlord, I'm going to have to find out about the whole TDHCA and the eviction program, and then the court is going to talk about it again at the eviction hearings. They're going to tell the parties where to go, and then I don't know if TDHCA has a list of resources that are out there other than whatever they have. But I think that's a good question. I don't know, Mark. I don't know if you were going to add anything to that.
No, that's pretty much what I was going to say. So thanks.
Yeah.
So it might be helpful, at least in our county, to do outreach to the justices from the homeless prevention programs, et cetera, and let them know about additional resources beyond the TDHCA funded programs.
And Bill, this is Nicole Farini. Can you all hear me?
Hi, Nicole.
I was trying to sit still, but y'all know me too well. I couldn't. So I just want to add that, Bill, you're on point. One of the things that we're trying to do locally, that we have tried to do over the last 8 months, but are going to continue to do even more forcefully moving forward, is streamline access to that assistance and the communication that we have, not just with tenants, but directly with landlords. One of the things that was very successful about the EP Rent Help program is that it was done in partnership with Under One Roof, which is in essence the nonprofit arm of the Apartment Association. And so we did a lot of direct education to landlords, where I think, to your point, maybe we could do some more, and we can brainstorm about this, is some of those more mom and pop, single property owner landlords that are not tied into these networks. That's something that I think we saw as a challenge in deploying the assistance. They were not savvy to the system, whereas large, property owners tend to be. Also, I would say that in partnership with the county, I have to give the county a ton of credit because we coordinate with them so closely, and they do make sure that the local JPs are well aware of the programs. And I know there's a lot of restrictions in terms of what the JPs can do. They cannot recommend a program, is my understanding. But we can, in fact, place that information outside their courts and make sure that there is that awareness. So those are the things that we've been trying to do. The other thing that I think is important as we message this is that, Omar mentioned this very clearly. It's any type of rental assistance. And I think Mark also mentioned it, by any means, right? Remedy this by any means in that period. And so, again, trying to streamline access points for El Pasoans so that it's very, very easy and clear how to navigate that system, whether the money's federal, whether it's TDHCA, whether it's TRAP or Treasury or HUD, or the tenants and the landlords don't care. They just want to know that the rent gets paid. And so I think our job locally is to just streamline that process and communicate. So that would be my response to Andy's question.
Jonathan, you had your hand up.
Yes, hi there. I just, Nicole, thank you so much for that reminder about some of the outreach that was provided to what we had previously identified as like the mom and pops of the world that were experiencing some level of, let's say, interruption with their income that they might otherwise be depending on when they are just like renting like a cottage or a backyard type of setup, which might be impacting their quality of life because what's happening to their tenant. I think because we've been here before, I'm not sure if Omar or anybody else on the line might have any advice as to ways that we can, through public records, be able to provide outreach to those people, whether it's just sending like a postcard or some sort of traditional, to Nicole's point, just some sort of traditional outreach. Anything short of course, I'm not going to go block walking and sharing with these people. But is this not something that can be interfaced with some of the other local government entities that have like a list of homes that are not on a homestead exemption or that might be listed as a rental unit or even an ADU? I'm just trying to think about how you reach those people that tend to be unreachable.
Right. I think that, that's a really good point. I think that over the last 8 months, fortunately, and in particular, I think over the last 3 or 4, EPRenthelp.org has become more widespread across the city. What I do know is, for instance, the water utility, when they were offering utility assistance, they put an insert in the bills that went out if you're having difficulty paying, and that sort of helps really spread it across the city. I mean, that's an example of how one agency was able to do that. I'm not saying that we can get, the water utility to start spreading the word about rental assistance, but I think starting to sort of look, I think it's a good idea to start looking at ideas like that. What does get mass distributed throughout the city beyond, typical news media, print media, digital media, and maybe looking at creative ways that we can get the word down to those, smaller, maybe, 1-unit landlords. I'm sorry, I don't have the solution right offhand, but that was the first thing that came to mind is, there are other distributions that do get out across the community. And to take a better look at that as the new streams of rental assistance start coming into the community, because it's certainly our goal to assist those individuals as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. That's a really good point. And the only reason I ask is because it seems like some of those people that you mentioned, say for example, I think I just saw our District 2 representative mention that Project Bravo was going to stop accepting applications yesterday. In instances like that, I just hope that they know, like, hey, yes, they can't accept applications, but they can refer and say, but here's another community project that's on the horizon that might be opening up for this date. And it might seem like a duplication of efforts, but I think that redundancy is needed so that we ensure that those funds are fully utilized and they don't get left by the wayside.
Omar, you want to speak? Go ahead.
Yes. So I think that's an excellent question, Mr. Macias. If I could just put in my 2 cents and nothing to do with legal, but I think, one, if it were up to me, I would make sure that TDHCA knows about all these programs because the courts are going to funnel them to TDHCA, right? The citation itself, it's going to refer them to TDHCA, right? So I think, one, making sure that TDHCA knows about all these programs. I think, Mr. Schlesinger, you had the idea of reaching out to the JP courts, making sure they have all of that in there. I think that's another great way. Ultimately, I mean, if people are going to get evicted, eventually they're going to get funneled to the court process, right? And that's why this program is the way that it is, because if I want to evict somebody, whether I have a contract or not, I have to go through the court. And the court is forced to inform everybody of that program. So I would say making for sure TDHCA knows about the programs. I think the JP courts is an excellent idea. And then, of course, everything else that everybody else is trying to do. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
So the only thing that I would add is that tracking informal evictions is both difficult and necessary. This program is admirable, and it'll work when people go through the system. But what we know about El Paso is not everybody always goes through the system.
Excellent point, sir. Yes, absolutely.
So the outreach that Jonathan was talking about, I think, becomes even more critical with the smaller landlords who are more likely just to put a note on the door that says, "Get out of here, I'm changing the locks." Any last comments?
Well, I guess my last comment would be that, you know, it is time, you know, if we've been chewing off pieces of the AI one at a time, and I'll have a little bit of an update for you on that later on. It is likely now time to start getting the ball rolling on what we talked about in terms of a marketing campaign, and using that to get, you know, whether it's you know, billboards in areas with higher concentrations of these, you know, 1-2 unit landlords, or, I mean, I'm not going to pretend to be, you know, a marketing expert, but, you know, that is likely the next thing out of the analysis of impediments that we want to begin implementing very shortly.
Okay. Thank you, Omar. We appreciate it.
Thank you for your time, Chair.
Good night. Annual Fair Housing Task Force report to City Council.
Okay. So as many of you know, you know, the task force provides an annual presentation to City Council, and we were thinking that February 2nd might align really well for that opportunity for you all to give that annual presentation, because on February 19th.
Sorry, it's my house going off.
Oh, okay. On February 19th, City Council, we will be introducing the amendment to the Fair Housing Ordinance to include protections for sexual orientation and gender identity, and changing the word handicap to disability. And so then that ordinance, the final ordinance, will be going to council on February 2nd. And we thought that that might align really well as an opportunity for you all to provide that update. And so what I was thinking about doing here is, sorry, shared the wrong. I always do that because the last screen shifts in at the last second. Sorry, here we go. Is you know, if you'll indulge me to sort of lead you through 3 questions, and I'll preview them for you first before we come back to this first question, and to you know, either roundtable or open it up to the group, you know, sort of take a look back over the last year and, you know, what was accomplished, to talk about, and this would certainly be a roundtable conversation to sort of get everybody thinking, you know, what is the #1 goal for each of you during the term of service on the task force? And lastly, in light of that, what is the task force looking to accomplish in the coming year? And so, well, actually, let me even preview this. You'll notice that this is an action item, because then the last thing that we'll want to talk about is the task force assigning 1 or 2 folks to work with staff to put together that presentation over the next few weeks. And then also, you know, to identify who will be, you know, actively engaging in the presentation itself to City Council. And so, you know, starting with the first bullet point, and this one I might just open up to, you know, the entire task force just for a conversation. You know, looking back on the last year, what are the first things that come to mind in terms of, you know, accomplishments, the work that's been done over the last year of the task force, which I know seems like an incredibly long year and a challenging one. And I have a couple of ideas, but I'm holding on to them.
I think we have to talk about the review that we got for the overall housing plan and the directions that that's taking us.
Anyone else? Or do we have to do a round table? Or I can start doing something like this really slowly and somebody can jump in.
I would suggest a round, y'all. I would really like to hear from every single committee member, please.
Okay, so let me just go by the list here on the agenda. By those who are here, Jonathan Macias.
I might ask for us to come back to me only because I think one of the biggest mental hurdles that I have right now is just how much we have had to change in the way that we're doing our work. I would say selfishly, one thing that I would like to see continue is if we could have a review of the way for continuing to be able to meet in this fashion, because I think it will open it up for more participation in the future. And then maybe we could look at our trends and see what our absentee and our lateness has been. Because I think there's a lot of folks that sometimes get stuck at the office and could otherwise join. They just can't always join in person. But I'll definitely pipe back up once I think a little bit more about the goals. And I did just want to take this time to continue to say that I'm thankful for the staff and the team and their due diligence. And I think we're getting one of the big things with the expansion. We're actually bringing up to parity the expansion and the protections for this new population that'll be going forward.
One thing that I would just add, Nicole Perini, for the record, Jonathan, I think that it's incredibly appropriate for it to be part of your presentation, how your process has changed and how, the work that you're doing is more or less effective, hopefully more effective. I hope that's what we're going to say, due to, how we've engaged, the information that maybe has been brought to you, maybe some of the sort of sub-working groups that we established early on with the AI. Those are just some suggestions reflecting your comment, because I think it's important for the council to understand that it hasn't been business as usual for at least a year.
Nicole, I think that's a really good point, and you bring up this idea of us maybe coalescing around what has worked and what hasn't. And in earnest, I can't think of anything that hasn't really worked. So,
well, that's music to my ears.
Okay, I think Rosa Estrada is the next up, and yeah, I feel bad for Andy Farias because this is going to get harder and harder as everybody goes.
What was that?
Rosa. Is Rosa still with us? Oh yeah. You're on mute. I don't know if you're.
Meanwhile, we wait on her mark, if I may. What are the expectations, I guess, for the sub-working groups to work with, staff in the coming weeks, of course, in preparation of the presentation of the AA to Council? I guess a more detailed rundown. That way, we know what to commit to and what to expect and what staff can expect from us in the coming weeks before February 2nd.
Sure. I mean, what I'm seeing is taking all of these notes and thoughts that we're throwing out there right now, and then working with the sub-working group to, put those into a cohesive presentation so that the task force can, stand in front of council and, celebrate our victories from the last year, talk about our challenges, talk about, quite frankly, what the purpose is of the task force. And that's where I think, what are the, top goals for each of you in your term on the task force? I think that really sort of helps define the purpose of the task force to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And then, giving them a preview of the work to come over the next year. And so it would really be just, working probably on just putting together a PowerPoint based on all of these thoughts that we're getting down right now.
So Rosa's having trouble unmuting. I've asked her to put her comment in the chat.
Oh, okay.
So I appreciate you covering things at that macro level, and not only that, but also explaining that ultimately would just come down to preparing the presentation within the sub-working groups through the staff and fleshing that out. And so to that end, I mean, within the sub-working groups, what is the timeline? I mean, do you want to have a draft ready? I mean, a week or two in advance of February 2nd? I mean, I don't even know how many weeks apart we are. I'm not in front of my computer right now, but is there, I guess, a deadline or a due date you'd like to have something to have everyone review from the top down?
Right. Yeah. I mean, if we start working backwards from February 2nd, the absolute, final day that we can post the presentation for City Council is January 28th, which is exactly 2 weeks and 2 days from now. And so really, we'd want to back that up to, at least having a draft of the presentation done by Friday, February 22nd, which is next Friday. And so, my thought, depending on the availability of those that are chosen, is that there's two ways we can do this. And we can either, as staff, take all of the comments we receive right now and put together a very rough draft of a presentation and then bring that to the subcommittee and, take an hour or so going through it, taking comments in terms of form and content, and then go back and finalize it. Staff can go back and finalize it and then send it out to the entire task force. The other way that I just think might take more time, I mean, if you're all comfortable doing that, I think that's the smoother way forward with a relatively short amount of time that we have. But the other way that we can do it is maybe for later on this week, set up an initial meeting before we start putting that presentation together to have a follow-up conversation on everything that we're putting on, that we're noting today, and start fine-tuning that so that staff can then put together maybe a more complete draft to then have a second follow-up meeting with the subcommittee just to kind of confirm that this is all okay, or maybe even just send it out to the subcommittee via email for final comments before we get it out to the entire task force, which would be, sometime later on next week that we would get it out to everybody. I suggest, again, that we do the first because I feel like it's a little bit less of a time commitment for those selected. But if you all are more comfortable being right there in the conversation at the very start of the drafting, beyond what we're doing tonight, then we can go forward the second way as well.
I think we better ask and see if there are any more comments.
Well, are there any more comments on that, or are there any more comments on
the content of what we're trying to get up? But Rosa has not put a comment in the chat. She was having problems unmuting, but I think anyone who has a comment, go ahead and put it in the chat, and that way the conversation can continue while Mark can capture the content issues out of the chat. So let's proceed that way. Okay,
so I'll continue going through the. Okay, Kimberly, you're next on the list. Any suggestions in terms of or thoughts in terms of what we've accomplished over the last year? I think there are a number of things.
One of the things that I would say we accomplished or have done differently is we took on a more hands-on approach in outreach. We were more active as a task force in getting the information out to people using our own channels so that they could take advantage of things that would help them with rental assistance, etc. So that is something that is that I've noticed that we have done a little differently, or a lot differently. It even helped with the surveys when those surveys were being distributed. We took an active role in letting people know, there's a survey out here. if getting them the links, things of that nature. So as a task force, we were more active.
I agree. That's a really good point. Bill, you're next up. Or wait, you already said the commentary on the regional housing plan. I'll I'll give Marcelo and Andy a chance. Marcela Carrillo.
Yes, I wanted to say I'm kind of like late to the game. I came in September. My official meeting was October, but you guys have really caught me up to speed of where you guys were at. And it's really, really interesting to see that, we could share to the people what's going on with our community. But I'm still kind of like learning as I go. But I'm really like impressed with everybody's knowledge and input when it comes to discussing matters concerning our citizens.
Okay, well, thank you. And then Andy, and if we do a roundtable again, Andy, I'll let you go first.
No, it's fine. I think something that struck me as noteworthy is the way that the task force has adapted, both in terms of responding to anything that's directly related to the pandemic, or still keeping in line with, the issues at hand, regardless of the status of the pandemic, not in a neglectful or detrimental way, but anything just being very mission oriented. For example, what we're gonna present on the second, or you guys are, with the resolution, I should say, or the ordinance, if I'm not mistaken, of those who protections for those who are going to be covered soon by sexual orientation or sexual identity. And so, that's very promising that we were able to identify and continue to work towards things that are very mission-driven and aligned to the purpose of the task force. So I think, macro level things of that nature have been, huge wins for the task force on a generic, level.
Yeah, I definitely think it's been a challenging year. I think that we've all done, pretty great job. And I mean, with this item, I'm just so thrilled that, first of all, it was identified in the analysis of impediments, and secondly, we found what has so far been a very smooth road and very rapid in terms of establishing law to get this taken care of. Yeah.
Right.
Jonathan, your hand is up.
Mark, I wanted to come back to something that I was thinking about as we were having this discussion, and I wanted to ask you: would this be the forum where it's presented to council some of the trends from the last AI? And the number one thing I'm thinking about is that I think in mid 2020 there had been a couple of things that for whatever reason maybe we just weren't able to get traction, or the last group wasn't able to, and that kind of persisted, or I'm not sure if it's been incremental updates. But I'll stop there and give you an opportunity to answer that first question, just because I think it's important to have that level of transparency.
And stop me if I'm not answering your question, but if I understand your question, you're talking in terms of trends, in terms of reporting of fair housing complaints. Is that where you're going, or did I miss it?
One that sticks out in my mind, and it might be a little bit of a like a bad memory here, but I think I remember there was something to the effect of in the 2016, if I'm not even sure if that's the right date, but there was supposed to be the launching or the bolstering of the method for tracking some of the fair housing complaints, and that had been something that maybe just from like an outcomes is coming up again in the latest AI, and we still haven't had an opportunity to fully launch something. Or I think Nicole Farini had mentioned it had been done. It just maybe wasn't posted in the place where it was publicly available yet. I can't remember. Maybe somebody else has a better memory.
I was about to ask the same question. Sorry. Yeah.
Right, and there, I think my understanding is, and my position is that we got better at it, but we're not there yet. and that there are steps that we can take to, well, yeah, basically to improve on that. And so, and while that was presented to council, as you know, when we presented the AI itself, I think it's still, you know, appropriate, and it probably, you know, will be a portion of, you know, what's to come in the upcoming year, you know, what we're looking to accomplish. And, you know, I think that there is some low-hanging fruit, and I think that that is one of them. And so, I mean, I don't think it's wrong to, you know, tell council that, you know, in the previous AI, we wanted to improve tracking. You know, we did to a certain extent, but, you know, we also acknowledge that we could be even better at it. And that's something that we're going to be looking to tackle over the next year.
Right. And okay, so then I think that's one of them. And I think overall, my goal, and maybe this is going to help foment what we're looking at here in terms of what was accomplished over the last year, but what do we want to do in this upcoming year? I don't know how the rest of the task force feels, but my goal would be that we adopt kind of like an agenda or like a top priorities, and that we're consistently working towards those. Because I felt like when I first got on the task force, I was constantly reacting to what was being presented instead of saying, no, this is what we're adopting. And it's easier to kind of leverage our resources to continue to support those items, let's say within a quarter or a year or what have you.
Nicole, you had a comment?
Oh, I was just going to respond to Jonathan and kind of reiterate what Mark said. In terms of the reporting, to remind the task force, what we did is we restructured the staff so that, in essence, instead of a single individual handling 100% of the work, we split that out across about 6 people so that there was A, more institutional knowledge about what was going on, B, spreading of the workload and ability to respond more quickly. But the next step, to Jonathan's point, was how do we now leverage technology and make sure that how the complaints come into the staff of now 6 people instead of 1 gets improved. And so we did, to Mark's point, we did step A. Step B is forthcoming.
Got it. Thank you, Nicole.
Have we done the round table, or are we?
Are there any final comments?
I have a final comment, and I think that the frame has changed from when I first joined the task force to where it is now. The initial frame for the task force was a much more legally defined and constrained process that dealt with federally mandated or federally legislated fair housing rules. And I think with both Kimberly and Nicole, we have moved from that to a much more dynamic, flexible review of housing needs, possibilities, and challenges. And that's been transformational. Any other comments?
One thing, if I may, this is Nicole Farini again, just to make sure that you all are feeling comfortable. We want to make sure that when you present this to the council, you know, we're going to take all these comments, we're going to make it pretty. We're going to put it in a presentation format. We may come in and add some data to back up what you all are saying. So, for example, when the outreach was mentioned, we may come in and supplement with, you know, the specific activities that were conducted. So we'll help you in that way. But I want to be very, very clear that this has to be your voice to the council, not necessarily the staff voice. And that, to me, to Bill's point that he just made, and thank you, Bill, for that. Yay, that makes me smile. Is that our effort over the last at least 2 to 3 years has been to shift how things were being presented to and decisions that were being made, and how you all were being empowered. from staff driven to really allowing you all to leverage your expertise and make it a task force that has a true advisory capacity to the city council. And so it has to be your voice. And so I'm thrilled to kind of hear these comments, and I want to make sure that y'all feel comfortable doing that, particularly now. I think Mark is going to probably go into what do we want to do going forward. The frame for the council is going to be, this is your voice. This is not staff standing there making a recommendation. This is their appointed constituents, letting them know in public, what you'd like to see. So I just wanted to give you that empowerment as well.
And thank you, Nicole. And one last thing I would ask is there the extension to provide additional feedback or more thought out feedback over the next coming days via email or other form of correspondence communication, be it to Mark or a designated point of contact beyond tonight's phone call?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we, like to get as much as we can out of, the task force as a whole right now. But I mean, I also realize that, we're hitting you trying to get, your gut reaction, top of your head, thoughts here. And so if you want to let it digest a bit and send it out, I think what might be good is, you can send those comments to us. And if you all are comfortable with it, just as an FYI, we can send those additional comments out to the rest of the committee so that everybody knows what we're looking at.
Very well. We appreciate the flexibility there. Thank you so much, Mark and Nicole and the team.
Sure.
One last note, y'all, as you correspond via email, as a reminder, you can always send emails to the staff with your comments. We will reply to the group. Reminder, don't ever reply all to a task force email because we ride the line then of violating the Open Meetings Act. I just want to remind everybody because that becomes a big issue. So just please be cautious of that.
Thanks.
Jonathan?
Just one last thing that popped up is, Nicole, I don't know if you're the staff. I feel like in 2020 there was a litany of other fair housing task force that were reviewed across the state. And I don't know if there are any things that the staff feels like we should be having on our radar to bring our local task force up to parity.
Oh,
that might be one of those open-ended things. Now we're flipping the script, Mark.
You kind of got me there because, I mean, I think that, to some of the comments that have been made already, I think that we've made some pretty great strides over the last year or two. To your point, it's never a bad idea to look back and benchmark or look around and see where we are, in comparison to, similar bodies or what other cities are doing with their task forces. I think that what we have done to some of those comments again is catch up, but at this point, have we surpassed? I don't know. It's probably a good idea to take a look.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Nick. Really quick, just to Mark's point, Jonathan, when we were researching the protected rights for people who identify as LGBTQ, we did reach out to big cities in Texas, and we also actually reached out to HUD to kind of get best practices. So I think that's a really valid point, and we'll continue to reach out to other cities, not only in Texas, but I think within our region, to continue to gain best practices.
Okay, thank you, Nick, and I appreciate that. And forgive me if I misspoke. I don't mean that we need that continual benchmarking is great. I'm just asking the staff to reflect on the times that we looked at things in 2020. If there's anything that caught your mind as, oh, I wish we were doing that, because I think this is also we depend heavily on whatever you guys are seeing out there when you're doing your benchmarks in real time. And if there's anything that we've inadvertently let go by the wayside that might need to be brought back forward for us to have for consideration that would only make the city better, that's what I meant.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I mean, and that again, to sort of how more flexible and just outside of just rules and regs we are now, that as those things come up, I like to think that we are bringing those to the task force on an ongoing basis. And so they're really, and I think that there are some things that we incorporated into the AI that was based on that, and that's still pretty fresh. And so I mean, to be honest with you, right now I don't necessarily have anything that I've found that we should be doing in the arena of fair housing that we haven't discussed at one point or another over the last year.
So that makes a good transition into the goal for this coming term.
Right, and so again, just to
roll up, we go home.
and again, just to sort of frame this a little bit, this is going to lead into that third question, and they might seem a bit similar, but as thinking about your entire term, what's your number one, like, what's your purpose on the task force as an individual? What do you want to accomplish? Because then that will lead into in light of that, what is it that the task force wants to accomplish in this coming year? And so to go back around the other way and start with Andy, what are your thoughts?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mark. Can I interrupt really quickly? I'm sorry, Andy. I just want to also frame this just a little bit, get y'all's wheels turning. I want to make sure that when we're talking about the future, and I have to say mea culpa a little bit for this question in terms of, the question about individual goals. We want to make sure that as we're presenting the goals to the council, that they are things that the task force would like to see achieved, not necessarily granular task. Staff should do this or council should do that. It should be goal oriented and not task oriented. And so I feel like that's I just want to frame that for you guys as you're thinking through it. What do we want to achieve? Not necessarily what do we do to achieve that. Does that make sense? I see some nodding heads.
More, a mid to long term community wide perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And it may be useful even just to think about it, even if we don't write it down, sort of where does responsibility for some of that lie? That may be something important for us to consider, even if it doesn't get written down in the presentation. So go ahead, Mark, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. I was going to start off and give Andy the opportunity to give the first thoughts on this.
I mean, yeah, so sorry, this is the first time I'm calling in, not in front of the computer, so I'm going back and forth. That's where I was just trying to really just kind of let things percolate a little bit and before jumping in with immediate thoughts. And so, sorry, I'm running errands at the same time here. That's why I wanted to see if I can go ahead and, afford, the night to, really think this through and send, the correspondence your way with, the feedback and input and thoughts that you're seeking from everyone right now.
Okay. I mean, yeah, in terms of this, I think that's certainly fair enough. This is a deep question, but I'd still like to, go around to everybody. For those of you, who may, when you approached your city representative and said, I'd really like to get involved in the Fair Housing Task Force. What was that event that happened? What's and then based on that, what's the overall goal? Why are you on this task force? What got you here, and what's the broad issue that you're looking to address in the community through your service on this task force? And so with that, Marcela Carrillo?
Yes. Listening to your question, I was thinking what brought me to the task force was trying to help other people, because sometimes you do have friends and neighbors, and they come and they ask you, well, where do you go? Where do you look? And sometimes, we're kind of stumped, but I think that'd be kind of my goal, is to help proliferate the message out there that there is assistance and that we do care. Because I think sometimes people think we don't care. So that would try to be my goal. I'm starting this new year. That would be my goal. Try to continue getting as much as information and be as positive as possible.
And Mark, if I may, I think I might have missed the mark. I thought we were still going back to the original question earlier, and I think that was a very great response, by the way, earlier. I mean, for me, as far as really the compelling reason to have joined the Fair Housing Task Force is, I mean, ultimately, housing should be a human right, and so the privilege to serve on the task force, it's honestly a unique opportunity to really strengthen that notion. And so by joining like a working group in coordination with the city of El Paso to strategically, thoughtfully address, any systemic housing impediments, I think that the platform, intersects with the need of a vulnerable, community, and ultimately to empower them in the process. If that's more so what you're trying to
now.
A response.
And I'm really typing poorly today. It might be because I'm on the spot and being recorded.
What was that? I'm sorry.
Oh, nothing. I was just joking. Don't worry about it. And it wasn't about you. It was I was making fun of myself. Bill, you're next.
For me, it's been always about safe and affordable housing for low and moderate income individuals and families. And that's a supply issue in El Paso that needs to be constantly addressed.
Kimberly.
Coming aboard, I wanted to learn a lot more about the housing market and the problems with renting and things of that nature, because I do a lot of community work. I think one of the goals that I would love to see for the task force is to have more of the agencies and public appear or, have a voice at the table. I think that would be, really good to have those partners in the community to be present. It'll take a little bit of work, but I think that would just enhance the effectiveness of the task force.
Very good. Well, I think we always strive for that, and that's always a challenge. But I think that's something that we always, to your point, need. I'm really glad that you brought that up. We need to keep that drumbeat and keep reminding ourselves that it really shouldn't be no task force or advisory board should just be staffing the board. And growing participation is certainly, I think, a very important goal moving forward. Rosa.
Rosa has her comment in the chat.
Oh, okay, great. Let me So she says, to continue to assure that our community provides quality housing for homeless persons. Absolutely.
Mark, this is Nicole again. One thing I would like to add, I think complementary to the task force, is that, we started to talk a lot more, to Bill's point, more broadly about what the needs in our community are. And when you look at, protected classes, it's predominantly race and ability based. And I think what we've identified and what this task force has empowered us to be able to do is really look at poverty and really look at, the nature and the culture of our community, not reflective of race specifically, but the culture of El Paso as a place and how that impacts fair housing practice. And that's something that I think it was Jonathan maybe earlier that was asking, how does it compare to other groups across the state? I think we probably need to do some more homework on that to give you a specific answer, but I think we're very groundbreaking in viewing fair housing in that way through that type of equity lens. And so, again, I said this was supposed to be in your voice, not mine, but I would definitely compliment the task force on that. And I think that's something that you've helped us drive forward over the last year.
And I think finally, Jonathan.
So one thing I was thinking back to, when it comes to the goals, I wanted to echo the chair's sentiments about the additional access and transparency, for lack of a better word. And I was reflecting on the ordinance that I think created the Fair Housing Task Force. And I think it'd be nice, well, not nice, I think it'd be beneficial if we could go back to leveraging those ex officios that are in our ordinance that include various members from across the city as well as the state. And then as things continue to progress, maybe expanding to some representatives or ex officio memberships from those additional protections that are going to be adopted. And I'll just reference it just to keep it in the minutes. This is Ordinance 013629, and it just mentions that there are various ex officios that come from either the El Paso Apartment Association, the El Paso Builders Association, the local universities and colleges, El Paso Legal Aid Society, the EADA coordinator for the city of El Paso. And I think just going back and reminding these people that they have a seat at the table to see what we're doing, and we're also always open to feedback.
I think that's a great way to start looking at, what we were saying here and engaging more people and taking this conversation beyond what, and again, we're operating under a pandemic, but, beyond the group that we meet with every month, let's say.
Right. Well, no, I think that's right. And these things are happening organically anyways. Nicole mentioned some of the organizations that are working hand in hand with some of these assistance programs, and they're nested under the nonprofit arm of some of these organizations. So it's already happening. It just needs to be bidirectional.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate y'all going through that. I think that could be challenging, but I think it's also really, interesting. Sometimes we get caught up in the nitty gritty, and to stand back and sort of think, what am I here for? Really helps. And so now, in looking at, what we've accomplished over the last year, and those broad goals that we want to achieve for both the task force and for the community. I guess I'll go around one more time, and ask everybody, if there's one thing, and it's okay if several of you have the same thought, but thinking realistically, again, with the constraints that we're under right now, and probably will be for at least the next 6 to 9 months, if not more. What are the key issues? And I think, and Nicole, feel free to jump in, but I think here is when we can get a bit more task oriented in terms of we accomplished so much last year. What are we looking to accomplish? And what do we want to be coming back to council next February with and celebrating? And with that, I'm going to go in sort of a middle of the road order. So Kimberly, how about we start with you? And right now, I've made just a couple of notes just about like other future comments. So that's what I have down there.
the idea of the attendance and more involvement from, I found the word stakeholders, is what I was, that just keeps coming to light. That for whatever reason, I think that is something that we've talked about. That's something that we need. And I think we need to work a little bit more with that, especially with our representatives and talking with them. I mean, they're the ones that appointed us to this. So we definitely need to have more conversations with them, so that we can have more people, like I said before, at the table, more stakeholders, joining us. Because this task force it is very effective, and it can only get better from here.
Okay, great. Rosa. Any thoughts on that? Oh, sorry, you have to type them in. Let me go ahead and type them in. Jonathan.
Thank you, Mark. I don't have anything further to add. I think I'm pretty much in parity with the chair.
Okay, great. Bill.
For me, the supply issue remains a challenge in the year to come, in that I'd like the task force to work to identify additional resources that we could bring to bear to increase the supply of low and moderate income housing. I'd like us to be proactive, not simply trying to identify problems with existing housing, but how do we generate more?
That's great. And we'll certainly, be working with you. We'll be happy to work with you on that, because that's, one of the main priorities of our department. And, I've put myself on the line to say as the city as well. I think that I'm very conscious of that. And I think that through the, one thing that we are talking about is, because of the pandemic, some of the work of the El Paso Regional Housing Plan through the Joint Housing Task Force has been delayed. And, it's something that we're actively talking about in the department to get that Joint Housing Task Force together so that we can at least, identify several, focused priorities that we could still taking care of, that we can, begin taking care of. And, certainly, figuring out ways to identify additional resources to increase the stock of affordable housing is up for discussion as, a focus of that group.
And Mark, this is Nicole again. I think you're on very solid ground saying that the city supports equitable and enhanced development of affordable housing. One thing that I might suggest, because I know that some of the task force members are thinking about sending in additional comments as we move forward through the week. If you can resend to the group our presentation that we did on the AI, as well as the housing plan that Bill referenced earlier. These two documents, folks, I think might help jog your thinking a little bit in terms of things that we've talked about and identified in the past. And we can look at how might we prioritize some of that stuff, because, COVID's not over, unfortunately. And so we may find ourselves in a position by, April, May, June that, we're not able to press forward as aggressively as we'd like on certain things. So to have a prioritization of things you've already identified could be really helpful.
Yeah, I will absolutely do that. I'll get that out first thing tomorrow morning to everybody. And so I think we're getting Marcella, what are your thoughts here on the upcoming year?
I have to agree with Bill. I do think, to find more, not inventory, but to see what's out there. Because, like I said, I'm playing catch up, but I really want to see, to be proactive, like he was saying. I think that makes a lot of sense. Because especially because I live in the Mission Valley area, and I know there's some new things that are popping up, but a lot of people are, they're too afraid to ask, or they don't know where to go. So I would have to agree with Bill and his statement.
Right, and I don't know exactly what that triggered this in my mind, but looking at the two items that we have right now, expanding stakeholder involvement and increasing the affordable housing stock, I think one thing, and I'd like to know what you all think, is one thing we have to tackle, and I'm thinking of this in relation to several items that have come up recently, where basically NIMBYism, and I know that we talked about that in the AI, but I think that by expanding our stakeholder network and those in this conversation, and leveraging them and their networks, that might be one way that once we find those identify those resources, that we can I guess reframe in some ways what would have been way too long, I think, a negative perception of not just affordable housing, but high density housing in general, and how that can be built appropriately in ways that don't significantly impact post World War II type single family development. That's just a comment. I don't know if anybody has anything to say about that before I move along to.
I have too much to say to get into it.
Jonathan,
Mark.
Sorry,
no, you're good. I think you're onto something here, and I know that in recent days and weeks, not just recent days and weeks, but since the start of it, the Delta site. Speaking of NIMBYism, there's a perfect example of that, right? And so, I think it's the matter of, what we look forward to. I think it's a matter of not just reflecting on lessons learned, but codifying some of these lessons learned into 2021 and beyond to ensure that, we can start, I think, providing a more premeditated awareness of, the value and really just equity for housing throughout our community.
Well, I got to make a little speech here. We've seen what happens when falsehoods are allowed to dominate the discourse. NIMBYism is based on falsehoods all throughout. My property values are going to go down. They don't. My neighbors are going to attack me. They won't. We've allowed falsehoods to dominate the NIMBY conversation for far too long.
Right.
And you know what? Really interesting that you guys just came full circle. Does this not really part of that come back to the outreach and the education and the engagement of a broader subset of stakeholders, right? Not just folks that are already committed to these issues, but folks that may not be aware that they should be, and that it benefits them for the community as a whole to be more equitable. So I feel like we've just come back around on NIMBY to the outreach component.
It also comes back to holding people accountable for what they say. Because you can do a lot of outreach and still run into racism and classism. Those are entrenched values, and they have to be addressed with more than just it's in your self-interest not to be a racist, not to be a classist. That's
putting an emphasis on messaging.
Right, and so. Yeah, I do appreciate all the feedback, and I also appreciate that, to a certain extent, this is, not to a certain extent, I appreciate that this is very focused. one of my concerns was we'd end up with 16 bullet points, and then we'd have to, start really looking at, okay, what can we realistically tackle out of this list? But I think having a more narrowly focused agenda for the next year is a really good idea, so that we can, do everything we can to make solid strides in these areas. Any other final comments? Because that's the next thing we're going to do is just get into the talking about who wants to work with us over the next couple of weeks. Any final comments on any of these questions really, or any of the conversation that we've had? Okay. Well, hearing none, then I think that takes us to the action item, which is pretty much if you all can establish one or two, I would say certainly at the most three individuals from the task force that will be looking forward to working with us over the next couple of weeks to get a presentation out to the rest of the group, and then and prepared for council, and who the representative or a couple of representatives may be to deliver the presentation to City Council.
I'll help.
And so I don't know if you'd like to take nominees and vote on them, or if we just want to take. I'm okay with volunteers as well.
And Kimberly, I think, needs to be our spokesperson. She's the chair. Oh, come on! You didn't have a question about that, did you?
I'll help them as well. No problem.
Okay. So then Kimberly will be the lead on the presentation, but in terms of who would like to work with us to put that together, I'll take volunteers. We don't have to make this a formal action item. We can. Okay, Kimberly as well.
Yeah, I'll help with that. Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? It's only the second and third week of January, coming out of a break. I'm sure nobody has anything else to do. I'll do it going once, and I'll do it slowly. Going twice.
Come on, everyone.
I'm happy to help, Kimberly. We'll just need to meet after work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Okay, so then we'll be reaching out to Kimberly and Jonathan tomorrow to just to coordinate, how we want to approach the work over the next couple of weeks. And with that, I think that
and Mark, also, I'm looking at my calendar, and I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time keeping up here as well. But I have a hectic month in front of me. I'm sure as we all do. But if I can be, an alternate, support as well, I'm happy to, help out and give a lending hand. I don't want to overcommit myself to something that I, can't follow through in. But if I can be of any assistance in preparing for February 2nd, I would be happy to do so. But I guess if we can just start with just laying out what kind of time commitments are expected, that would be great. Just get a better feel for it and taking it from there.
Sounds good. I mean, like I said, I think what we're probably looking at is, at least one and at most two, Teams meetings that shouldn't be any more than an hour. What we want to do is take your thoughts and then get them on to the PowerPoint. And so as long as, we feel that we're all on the same page in terms of the thoughts, we can go ahead, get the PowerPoint together, get the draft out for comments, and hopefully it's not a very burdensome exercise.
Fantastic. Okay, if that's the case, then feel free to sign me up, and then we can talk more once you reach out tomorrow, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, thank you all so much.
Let's turn to public comment. Do we have any public comment?
You know what? I think I did. Oh, I do have since it's not on the agenda, it's nothing that you all can take action on, but I want you all to be thinking about it for next time around. City Council is going back to meeting every other Tuesday starting at 3:30 p.m. And what that is going to do is really challenge staff in terms of availability for these meetings. And so I think on the next agenda, we may want to add an item to at least have a conversation about moving the day of the week that we're having these meetings. I mean, it'll certainly mean that, Nicole won't be available. Lately, it means about every other meeting, I probably wouldn't be available either. And so if you all can think about, Wednesday, Thursday evenings, do those work for you? Those tend to be, I don't think we want to be doing Fridays, and it's always kind of rough starting off Mondays with a late night committee meeting. So I would suggest thinking about Wednesday or Thursday. We could keep them on Tuesdays, but like I said, there might be a limited availability for staff. That's my only comment.
Any other public comment? Then let's turn to the request to excuse absent members. Do we have any excuses to excuse?
Yes, we only have one. Again, I can roll call all of the board members if you like. Right now, we only have 2 absent members, which are Mauricio Felix and Miguel Hernandez. And the only prior notification was Miguel Hernandez.
I think by common consent, we excuse Miguel, and following our practice, we do not excuse if there was no prior contact.
Okay, can I get a second?
I'm doing it by common consent. Is there objection?
Okay.
Not hearing any objections, it is done. And then we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Good night.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.